Hello, everyone. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. What is that, you ask? Well, it's a weekly show where we dig underneath the headlines. We look at what's really going on. We cut through the mainstream media nonsense and dig right down to that straight up truth. We talk about issues and events and activism at the international, national, state, and local level. And it is only here you can get that kind of sharp local leftist analysis. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University. So let's go ahead and start the show. This is actually kind of a follow-up to an issue we were talking about last week with the emergency marijuana rules. I wanted to come back with a little bit more clarification on what that actually means and entails. And got to tip my hat to Amy Viocini from M Live. She posted this article today around 12 o'clock noon. And it's a very, basically just a handy guide. 14 things to know if you want to start a marijuana business in Michigan. I know there's a lot of y'all who are kind of curious. So let's go ahead and dig right into this. Number one, you need a state license to do business. A state license is necessary to operate any kind of marijuana business in Michigan. Licensing fees start at $4,000 and top out at $40,000, depending on the type of business. The Marijuana Regulatory Agency controls the entire state licensing process and oversees both the upcoming recreational and existing medical marijuana markets. It's housed in the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs. Depending on where your business is located, there may be a local license or permit from the municipality that is necessary as well. Kalamazoo has not yet developed any of those laws around marijuana. We'll kind of have to report on that as it develops. Although this is fundamentally, I don't know how to say good news, necessarily better news. It certainly is. As we've talked about on the show, a factoid, a number we've tossed around a whole lot. So originally, and I believe this is still the case for medical marijuana dispensaries, it can be between 150 to 500 grand. And as we alluded to last week, it sounds like that particular rule has been curtailed for recreational dispensaries. $4,000 is a lot more affordable than $150,000. Certainly true. However, again, I think we need to be very clear to many of the people in the former underground marijuana economy. Many of those people who weren't doing it to get rich, but were doing it to keep food on the table. $4,000 might as well be $150,000. Now, $4,000 is a number that is far easier to achieve for a much larger chunk of working class people. But again, I want people to make sure and understand, just because this new ruling means that marijuana businesses can be potentially more inclusive to those kind of working class demographics, does not mean that they will be. Again, as it breaks down at the local level, and again, as many of the other state laws try to kind of support, it is going to be large multinational corporations who are going to have the utmost advantage in trying to get a foothold into the Michigan recreational marijuana market. But again, overall, it is an improvement. But let's not forget our dialectics, folks, our structural critiques. Again, it is technically a plant, so for $4,000 in order to sell a plant, that is not particularly harmful, honestly. Number two, there are multiple license types, and they can be combined. Each function of the industry has a different state license type. They can be combined to make one large vertically integrated company. Here are the license types and a short description of the function of each one. Number one is a retail. That's a brick and mortar storefront sales. So that's literally just the sale of marijuana. And then there's four different classes of growers. Class A grower can grow up to 100 plants. Class B up to 500. Class C up to 2,000. And there is a category excess grower, and that's for companies with at least 2 medical marijuana grow licenses and up to 5 Class C recreational licenses that want to operate on a large scale in the recreational market. Again, when we're talking about these larger corporations having the capital to do this, that's primarily where you're going to see that from. They also have categories, a micro business in which an individual can grow up to 150 plants, process the material, and sell it all at the same location. A processor, extracting and manufacturing products from marijuana flower like oils, edibles, vape cartridges, and more. A secure transporter, that's a transportation company that moves products from growers to the lab, to processors, and then to retail stores. A safety compliance facility, that's a testing lab to make sure products meet state standards. And a designated consumption establishment, a social use lounge or club. There are also additional license types for people who want to host festivals. Thinking of you, Electric Forest. Anyway. If you have the question, okay, when can I turn my application in? Well, here's the answer. License applications can be turned in starting November 1st. Once a business turns their license in, the agency has 90 days to turn it around. If applicants don't respond to officials' questions or requests for more documentation within 5 days, their application could be denied. Number 4, retail stores will have to be owned by a medical marijuana company at first. Under state law, for the first 2 years of the recreational marijuana program, only business owners that hold a medical marijuana provisioning center license will be allowed to apply for a retailer license in the adult use market. That requirement will stay in place until November 2021. However, officials have the option to remove that requirement in November 2020 if they deem it necessary. Large-scale growers will have to be owned by a medical marijuana company at first. Same prerequisite licensing requirements is in place for large-scale growers who want a Class B, Class C, or an excess grow license. Under state law, for the first 2 years of recreational marijuana, only business owners that hold a medical marijuana grow license will be allowed to apply for a large-scale grow license in the adult use market. That requirement will stay in place until November 2021. Officials do have the option to remove that requirement in November 2020 if they deem it necessary. Number 6, processors will have to be owned by a medical marijuana company at first. You're seeing a pattern here. The same prerequisite licensing requirement is in place for processors. Under state law, for the first 2 years of the recreational marijuana program, only business owners that hold a medical marijuana processing license will be allowed to apply for a processing license in the adult use market. That requirement will stay in place until November 2021. Again, there is the option to opt out a year early. Number 7, transporters will have to be owned by a medical marijuana company at first. Number 8, only Michigan residents can start a small business at first. Prospective small business owners who want to grow on a small scale with a Class A grow license or start a micro business don't have to hold any medical marijuana license, but they do have to be Michigan residents for the first 2 years of the program. Number 9, lab licenses have no residency requirements. There are no residency requirements or medical marijuana licensing requirements for individuals interested in obtaining a safety compliance facility license, unlike the other license types. However, and this is important, the owner of a safety compliance facility, more commonly known as a testing lab, cannot have an ownership interest in any other type of marijuana business. Now, here's number 10. Here's something I really don't like. This type of crime will disqualify you. If a business license applicant has previously been convicted for distributing a controlled substance to a minor, they are automatically not eligible for a recreational marijuana business license. Actually, that I do agree with. Additionally, there are other specific situations that would prompt state officials to immediately reject a license application. One, if the prospective business lies in their application, if the applicant either works for or consults with a marijuana regulatory agency, or if the applicant is an elected government official in Michigan, in another state, or in the federal government. So this one threw me a curveball, because as far as I'd known up to this point, before the emergency rules, it was a business license applicant has previously been convicted for distributing marijuana, period. In this language, it makes it sound like it's only if they sold to a minor. Again, I will try to track down an answer for that and bring it back to y'all, hopefully later in the show, if not next week. Number 11, state officials have discretion to deny you a license. State regulators have broad discretion to deny a business license application based on their judgment or the applicant's background under the emergency rules. Per the rules, regulators are allowed to consider the following: whether anyone with an ownership stake in the company has a pattern of convictions involving dishonesty, theft, or fraud that indicate their proposed marijuana establishment is unlikely to be operated with honesty and integrity, whether the applicant has any delinquent taxes, or whether the applicant has a history of non-compliance with any regulatory requirements, all legal judgments, lawsuits, legal proceedings, charges, or government investigations, whether initiated, pending, or concluded against this applicant that are related to business operations, including, but not limited to, fraud, environmental, food safety, labor, employment, workers' compensation, discrimination, and tax laws and regulations in this state or any other jurisdiction. So, actually, now we're here at number 11, and I do have a pause for a concern here. One of the problems, if you're talking about all legal judgments, legal proceedings, charges, government investigations, could that include sale of marijuana before the rule came down? Apparently, it is up to the discretion of this particular state board, state regulators. So I guess it would be very important to know who is in charge of regulating that and finding out when they meet, Open Meetings Act, some transparency, and of course, need for public input to understand and maybe help create this language in such a way that it does not exclude people who are part of the underground economy from participating in the current one. Number 12, expect background checks and inspections. State officials will be scrutinizing both the individuals that want to start recreational marijuana businesses, their business plans, and the physical facilities involved. Understanding who regulators consider to be applicants for state licenses is important. Though it varies slightly according to how the business is incorporated, the basic definition of an applicant is anyone with more than 10% ownership of the company. In some cases, this includes their spouses as well. Every applicant will have to undergo a background check and should expect to submit a year's worth of tax returns and to disclose criminal and financial background information. Additionally, the businesses have to have a physical building and must pass a pre-licensure inspection within 60 days of submitting their license application to the state. Number 13, be aware of local laws. Cities and townships have the ability to ban recreational marijuana businesses from opening their doors, and more than 600 have done so at this point. Municipalities also have the ability to start local licensing programs for adult use marijuana businesses, but they don't have to. It is important to note, Kalamazoo, I think it is very, very, very fundamentally unlikely that Kalamazoo will opt out of marijuana business. Just our place in Southwest Michigan, the political makeup, ideological makeup of our city. Again, though, as that process is going forward, we should be paying particular attention to what kind of regulations the city is making, who those regulations are tailored to, and whether or not they address some of these fundamental issues when it comes to historical equity, fairness, and making sure that working people are at the wheel when it comes to a burgeoning marijuana business. I've got a few ideas about that personally. I think we could use a municipal dispensary in this town, or some kind of prospective resource pool for local cannabis business owners to come from, and probably a ban on all those multinational corporations as well. But that's just my opinion. And like buttholes, everyone's got some. Anyway, number 14, no proof of capitalization is needed. Prospective businesses don't have to show state officials proof that they have money available to start their company. That's important to note because medical marijuana business applicants are required to show official proofs of capitalization. In the medical industry, potential businesses have to have from $200,000 to $500,000 in assets in order to be licensed. And again, that's the number we've referred to on the show before. It is the biggest takeaway. It is very good news to know that the threshold of money that you need to start a recreational marijuana business is achievable for a good chunk of working people. That is fundamentally good news. We also have to make sure that within that we are able to utilize that opportunity properly. Because again, if we don't get ahead of this, then it'll be very easy for the marijuana equivalents of Starbucks or something to corner the market, not only here, but in other big cities in Michigan. So we as the people really need to make sure we take the reins of this prospective new facet to our state's economy and make sure that it is available for the people and not just big agricultural monopolies. And again, I want to let everybody know, so that article, you can find that on MLive's website. 14 things to know if you want to start a marijuana business in Michigan. And specifically, I basically just read that through that. I know a lot of people out there are curious. They want to know what it would take to get involved in medical marijuana business. I highly recommend you go to the actual website. It's got a very important link in there. If you're interested in starting a medical marijuana business, stop reading and click here to learn more about its regulations. And that document, you can find that at michigan.gov. That is under the licensing and regulatory affairs, and it's the medical marijuana facilities licensing, the MRA, Michigan Marijuana Regulatory Agency, and you can get a lot of these details and you can get them in full. And if you are actually like for real legit thinking about starting a marijuana business, I think it's critical, go look that stuff over so that you are well prepared. So with that, I think we're going to go ahead. Let's take a quick break and come back. We got some more stuff to talk about. There's a protest slash, not a full-on strike, but there is an action taking place in the city from some of our lovely Metro Transit drivers. And I did want to make sure that we spend some time talking about that. So this is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
This is Justine from Math the Band. You're listening to WIDR 89.1 Kalamazoo.
Hello, everyone. We're back. So I actually got a phone call while I was on break, and is some important information. A fellow called who's involved in the industry, the marijuana industry, as we were just talking about, told me that if you are applying for a position at a medical marijuana dispensary, your previous marijuana conditions will not come into play when it comes to your potential employment. So that, again, good news, and something I was a little fuzzy on. I know the status quo was different even just a few months ago. Again, a lot of things are changing and evolving as things get laid out here. And I truly do believe, the improvements that have been made have been the result of grassroots organizing and good old public pressure. So I'm actually just going to turn the music up for a sec while I get the next story queued up. While you're doing, please enjoy the sweet sounds of Quantum Fleek. All right, now we're back for realsies. So, hold on. Oh, come on. Really? All right, here we go. Just a sec, everyone. All right, sorry about that, folks. I was having some technical difficulties there. So some of you may have seen him out near the bus station, raising some ruckus, rightfully so. But our very own local bus drivers are protesting in order to better their working conditions here in Kalamazoo County. I'm going to read from an article that was posted by MLive 2 days ago, written by Brad Devereaux. Long hours, low pay, and not enough time for breaks were some of the concerns expressed by those protesting outside the Kalamazoo bus station Monday, as union employees are in negotiations for a new contract. A group of protesters, including bus drivers, stood with signs Monday, July 8th, at the Metro Transit Station at 530 North Rose Street in downtown Kalamazoo, shouting and walking around the block as traffic passed. Earl Cox Sr. is president of the Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1093, which represents employees at Metro Transit. Cox held a sign that said, "My outrage can't fit on this sign." Employee complaints include poor working conditions and sometimes not having enough break time to go to the restroom or stop to eat, impacting the health of drivers, he said. Employees want to see changes in the next contract, he said. Metro Transit said in a statement that it is important that employees receive wages and benefits that are fair and reasonable, and Metro, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, I just don't really want to hear too much from Metro Transit. So, because a lot of it is deflection, and they're trying to kind of quiet the demands there. So, Cox, an employee for more than 22 years, said he made $18 an hour in 2009, or $18.03 specifically, and he makes $19.52 per hour today. He said the $1.49 raise over the past decade does not keep up with the rate of inflation, and that is absolutely true. We are so underpaid, Cox said. He believes some of the senior employees should make $27 an hour or more. Which, by the way, if you haven't heard me say this stat before, again, if the minimum wage had tracked with inflation, we would all be making at least $22 an hour. Excuse me. Employees are currently under an interim agreement with Metro Transit, he said, based on an old contract. You have to treat people right, he said. Buses continue to run throughout the protest, with some sounding their horns while passing the protesters. Another driver, Naomi Jones, said she has been with Metro Transit for 17 years and she would like to see improvements like better doors for the buses. Metro Transit emailed a statement in response to requests for comments on Monday, but declined to answer specific questions about the employee complaints. So, again, I want to kind of tip of the hats to the Amalgamated Transit Union out here, 1093. I want to express my own personal support for what they're doing. And hopefully, I haven't had an opportunity yet. I would love, if any of y'all from the Transit Union are listening, we would definitely love to have you on the show to talk more about your protest, why you're doing it, and what your overall goals are. So with that, we're going to take a real quick break. We're going to play a PSA. Come back. We got more stories to talk about here on the Hoodrat Strategist radio program.
Depression can take many forms. It can feel like static in your brain, or as if everything around you has lost meaning. It can debilitate even the strongest of people. 89.1 WIDR is here to tell you that there is help and a way to improve mental health. WMU offers counseling for all students in the greater Kalamazoo community at Synecu's Health Center. There is no need for an appointment for first-time visits. Open counseling times are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or Thursday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Synecu's is located at 1903 West Michigan Avenue, Kalamazoo. For more information, please call 269-387-3287 or visit www.wmich.edu/healthcenter.
Hello, everyone out there in Radio Land. We are back. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So from here, let's go ahead. This is kind of a on a different particular part of the states at a different particular topic. But let's talk about state surveillance going on about 150 miles to the east. This was published yesterday. It is from the World Socialist website. And the article is by Kevin Reed. It's called Detroit's Facial Recognition Surveillance System Exposed. The Detroit Board of Police Commissioners decided on June 29th to postpone a vote on the expansion of its use of camera and facial recognition technology amid growing public outrage over the system that has been in place since 2016. The decision to delay the vote followed a report the previous day in the Detroit Metro Times that the core surveillance technology, which is scanning and recording the activity of everyone in the city within sight of its extensive camera network at all times, which was purchased for $1 million and installed without any public review or discussion, let alone a vote of the Detroit City Council or the Police Commission. Early reports in the Metro Times exposed the use of the high-definition video cameras and face-scanning software by the Detroit Police Department to identify and track the movements of individuals at parks, schools, immigration centers, gas stations, churches, abortion clinics, hotels, apartments, fast food restaurants, and addiction treatment centers. The article also said that police can identify people in real time using databases containing hundreds of thousands of photos, including mugshots, driver's licenses, and images scraped from social media. As a meme I've seen floating around says, in a surveillance state, we're all cam girls. But most of us aren't getting paid for this. Honestly, though, it not very good quality. It's like a CCTV camera, and I'm probably not going to be doing anything that interesting when I'm walking down the street to the Circle K, for example. Anyway. Additionally, the report said the system is integrated with Detroit police body cams and the city's highly touted, groundbreaking, and crime-fighting public-private community partnership called Project Greenlight Detroit. The program involves placing cameras at a cost of $4,000 per location that stream live video to the DPD's real-time crime center at its downtown headquarters. A web page at DetroitMichigan.gov dedicated to the Project Greenlight hosts a map showing the location of nearly 600 surveillance cameras and says this infrastructure is for quote-unquote improving neighborhood safety, promoting the revitalization and growth of local businesses, and strengthening the Detroit Police Department's efforts to deter, identify, and solve crime. After the extent of the surveillance was exposed and public anger began to rise, Detroit Police Chief James Craig hastily called a press conference on June 27th in an effort to downplay the invasive nature of the system and justify its implementation. Forced to admit that the artificial intelligence and biometric system had been in place for the past 2 years without review, Craig became irritated. When questioned by the media about its legality, he said, "How come we never talk about the criminals? How come we never talk about the criminals? Yeah, that whole thing. Well, if you're not doing anything wrong, then you got nothing to hide." It really is amazing, kind of in this day and time, just how much our culture has shifted, where privacy just is really not put as nearly as much of a value. Again, another internet joke, 50, 60 years ago, paranoid is like, oh, is the government tapping my phone? Or, is the Cold War, are the Russians tapping my phone? Is my phone being wiretapped? Nowadays, it's like, wiretap, play my favorite album, and then the thing dings. Again, I'm referring to like those Amazon things, Alexa or whatnot. Which again, Amazon has a lot of contracts with the U.S. government, so keep that in mind if you're thinking about picking one up. Who's really listening? Spoiler alert! It's probably being put into some government server as we speak. Yeah. When asked about the situation, Democratic Mayor Mike Dugan has repeatedly refused to comment, even though he was a key decision maker in signing the 3-year contract with DataWorks Plus. The firm, located in Greenville, South Carolina, provides technology to more than 1,000 law enforcement agencies in North America and New Zealand. DataWorks Plus specializes in hardware and software systems that integrate traditional police identification databases like mugshots and fingerprints with more advanced biometric data such as iris and tattoo matching and voice and facial recognition analytics. According to the Metro Times, the city contract also allows for thousands of hours of surveillance video to be shared with third-party law enforcement vendors. While the smaller circulation alternative weekly Metro Times has played a role in questioning the city's surveillance operation, the two major daily publications, the Detroit Free Press and the Detroit News, have engaged in a campaign to cover up the anti-democratic implications of the police program. Both papers have published multiple articles extolling the benefits of the system to the public and just recently began reporting on growing public concerns. Among these free press and news coverage have been public relations pieces promoting the crime-fighting potential of Project Greenlight and quoting Mayor Dugan and the president of the Black McDonald's Operators Association on how it will bring a quote-unquote safer environment and make criminals think twice before committing a crime. Detroit's 24-hour live video surveillance system was initially exposed on May 16th when Georgetown Law School Center on Privacy and Technology published a study called America Under Watch: Face Surveillance in the United States. The report compared pilot facial recognition programs in Detroit and Chicago to similar systems operated in southwest China city of Guiyang, where police are purportedly able to locate and identify anyone who shows their face in public in a matter of minutes. The Georgetown Law Report explains that Detroit signed a contract for the Face Watch Plus real-time video surveillance software that operates not less than 100 concurrent video feeds. The Detroit Police Department's face recognition technology, which was approved by the Board of Police Commissioners and went into effect on July 1st, 2018, may connect the face recognition system to any interface that performs live video, including cameras, drone footage, and body-worn cameras. The city contract with DataWorks Plus also includes a mobile app that Detroit police officers may use to run facial recognition searches on the city's 500,000 mugshots. The system also provides access to Michigan's statewide network of agency photos, a database that includes driver's license photographs. Oh, this just keeps getting better and better as I read through it, doesn't it, folks? Oh. In their analysis of the Detroit system, Georgetown Law explains that Project Greenlight was essentially a Trojan horse used to pitch businesses that are open late at night as a way to deter crime and improve police response times to incidents at locales across the city. However, by April 2019, the number of Greenlight partners had been expanded to many other locations, including churches, schools, and support centers that revealed deeply personal information about religious, political, or social views or activities of people in a non-criminal organization or lawful event. It was Georgetown Law that brought to light efforts by Detroit city officials to obscure the facial recognition aspects of the Project Greenlight program. The study points out that neither the application to participate nor the agreement signed by private business partners within the city mention the use of real-time face surveillance. The Georgetown Law study also reviewed the democratic and constitutional issues raised by video-based facial recognition technology in general, writing, "By enabling the secret and mass identification of anyone enrolled in a police or otherwise government database, it risks fundamentally changing the nature of our public spaces." Among the constitutional violations of these technologies is a chilling effect on First Amendment free speech and peaceful assembly rights in public places under video surveillance, and the Fourth Amendment prohibition against unreasonable searches and seizures by secretly monitoring and cataloging every single movement of someone across time. The fact that Detroit's secret surveillance system has been in place for 2 years and plans were well advanced for a major expansion behind the backs of city residents is a political warning to the working class about the complicity of local media and the Democratic Party in the buildup of the infrastructure of a police state. Not a word would have been said about the issue if the public had not been informed about it and begun demanding that the program be stopped. For example, Police Commissioner from the 5th District, Willie E. Burton, who is an up-and-coming figure of Detroit Democratic Party politics with connections to presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, is just now calling for public hearings and a referendum on the facial recognition system following his enthusiastic endorsement of Project Greenlight over the past 2 years. Starting with the hearing on the House Committee on Oversight and Reform on May 22nd, Rashida Tlaib has been calling for a moratorium on the use of technology until we do something about it at a federal level. In other words, she would approve the use of facial recognition systems under U.S. government regulations approved by congressional Democrats and Republicans. By the way, this is from a very hard-left website. So they're basically trying to, and again, it's a part of a healthy Marxist dialectic, especially when you're talking about people who do the whole entryism thing into the Democratic Party. Better than most. Some of them are very, great figureheads for particular movements and do a lot of good work. But always be critical. Always be critical, even especially of people that you like. That's a bit more difficult. You can criticize people you hate all the time. Criticize the people you like, that's a little harder. The selection of Detroit as a testing location for advanced systems of facial recognition has both a political and historical significance. Despite the decimation of its industrial base, Detroit remains a center of the American working class with a long history of class struggle against big business and the state. Detroit is the location of an urban uprising in the summer of '67 in which federal troops and tanks were mobilized for the first time against the population of a major American city. As the poorest large city in the U.S., Detroit bears the deep scars of betrayal by the trade unions since the deindustrialization of the Midwest, an attack on working-class living standards that began in the 1970s. It is significant that not one word has been uttered by the unions in Detroit over the erection of a surveillance network. So again, if you want to read more about this or read this article for yourself, it's at the World Socialist website, written by Kevin Reed, Detroit's facial recognition surveillance system exposed. And I didn't read the last couple of paragraphs, but it does give you gives some political analysis and kind of gives their signature ending to or inclusion in these really great articles about basically making sure that you don't put your faith in the ruling class, which I agree is a bad idea. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break and then move on to another story. You're all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo.
Interested in underground hip-hop.
Here is a complete disc jockey show with all the modern pace of today's exciting radio.
Listen here on
Saturday night
from 7 to 10.
You can't go wrong.
There's one important element missing, however. That's you.
Hip-hop ethics show.
Saturday night.
I mean, DJs bring me young, play that real live show. The hip-hop ethics show.
I know you're gonna dig it.
Yo, I'm talking about the hip-hop ethics show. The DJ bring me young.
Transmitting live
Saturday night.
WIDR Kalamazoo.
Bouncy.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing technical difficulties. Please stand by.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. So on our previous episode, we went into great detail talking about the need for driver's licenses, actually, maybe that was the week before last. But it's something that we've talked a lot about on the show. But there was something that I left out and I forgot to report on. So this isn't a super fresh article, but it has some important information in it, and I would be remiss if I did not let y'all know what this information was. It's from the Detroit Metro Times. It was written and published on June 28th, 2019 by Tom Perkins. These Michigan reps voted for more, quote-unquote, concentration camp funding. Call them what you will, migrant detention camps, concentration camps, internment centers. Regardless, the conditions are undeniably awful. Kids are dying and being denied medical treatment. The Trump administration doesn't want to give kids toothbrushes, soap, or other items for basic hygiene. Many sleep on the floor, lice infestations are common, and the Trump administration is responsible for the kind of human misery that's only created by history's most awful governments. What kind of politician would vote to keep that nightmare funded? Turns out there's bipartisan support for it. Some Michigan Democrats joined all Republicans yesterday in passing a $4.6 billion emergency funding bill for the Border Patrol. A chunk of that money will go to immigration and customs enforcement and will help keep those camps open. So let's see, who do we got here that... So these are our lovely representatives in Congress. And some of these are a little more obvious than others. But let's go to the yeses first. And I will let y'all know right now, yes, our very own Fred Upton, not so surprisingly, voted yes to concentration camp funding. I'm sure his office is, it's to fund important national security stuff. It doesn't all go to, putting children in horrible concentration camps where they are not properly bathed. And the $700 or so that is ostensibly allocated for these kids every day is apparently, spent to line corporate pockets instead of actually used to take care of people. So yes, if you do indeed wish to do so, you do that sort of thing, you can let Fred Upton's office know how you feel about that. Other yeses included Paul Mitchell, Tim Walberg, John Molinar, Bill Huizinga, and Jack Bergman. And we got 3 yeses from the Democratic Party. Oh, boy. Dan Kildee, Haley Stevens, and Alyssa Slotkin? What? I thought she was supposed to be like the progressive candidate from the military-industrial complex. But Alyssa was actually featured on an article. We did an interview about a year back with a journalist with the World Socialist website, and it was his series on the quote-unquote CIA Democrats. People from the military-industrial complex who are trying to run as progressive Democrats. And then we'll give a shout out to some of these no's, these principled no's. Rashida Tlaib, of course, voted no. So did Andy Levin, Brenda Lawrence, Debbie Dingell, and hey, some credit to Justin Amash, who just decided to become an independent. And hold on just a second. I thought I heard someone knocking. Give me just a moment. Hello, this is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. I guess I was just hearing things, but I want to go on and talk about this. Of course, you may wonder, we got 2 Democratic senators here in Michigan. Of course, they voted against funding concentration camps, right? No, Both Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters said yes to concentration camps. Possibly more humane ones, you know. It's like, I want to make sure those kids at least have some soap. We're going to keep them locked up for no good reason. That was basically Nancy Pelosi's stance on it. She was like, you know, make sure that the kids get soap. And also, in order to... Well, basically, it was like her deal where she gave Trump a whole bunch of money for his dumb wall and for border security stuff. And basically said, you know, if somebody dies in your custody, you have to let us know in a timely manner. So... yeah, it's not, you know, no more deaths in our custody. Just let us know what's going on. All right, we like to be well informed about the crimes against humanity that our government is currently complicit in. And honestly, we felt so offended that you didn't give us the memo right away. Anyway. There is actually a little bit more to this. Representative Alyssa Slotkin issued a statement explaining that she voted yes on the bill to provide basic necessities for the detained migrant children. Okay, that is really bad reasoning. You know why that's bad reasoning? What's that number I just cited earlier? They're paid $750 a day per inmate. I can't tell you the exact article I quoted from, but that is publicly known information. It's been spread around. It's not that we don't have the resources to provide basic necessities for these detained children. We have more than enough. $750 a day, that's more than enough for toothpaste. That's more than enough for soap. It's more than enough for the staff to keep these children imprisoned with their soap and toothpaste and shampoo. No. It's not that these camps don't have enough funding. It's that this funding is being skimmed down to the points where these children, these detained refugees, are getting the absolute bare minimum, while that money is basically being kind of fed into the pockets of these participating corporations that profit from these detention camps. From these concentration camps, I should say. I'm sorry. So it's just the perfect synergy of capitalism looking for new and exciting and appalling frontiers, and the abject cruelty of gleeful white supremacy. As described, a couple weeks ago, talking about AOC going to one of these facilities. Just gleeful white supremacy with some good old toxic masculinity thrown on in there. Yeah. So you mix that kind of, delighted cruelty with the profit motive, and that is the reason that the camps have those conditions. It is certainly not because they aren't getting enough from an appropriations bill by the U.S. government. That was a very... I'm not even going to go on and read the statement, because I think that was a very callous thing to say. Actually, and there is a correction down here. Nope, Justin Amash and Debbie Dingell... they did vote no. Sorry. So, just so you know, the people in our government who are complicit in this, they got names, and they got donors too. But yeah, it would be very interesting if you, particularly Fred, cross-reference this vote with corporations and businesses that profit from these concentration camps being open. And in fact, that's actually a good segue because we are going to continue talking about Fred Upton in just a bit. But for now, let's just go ahead and go to a quick break. Y'all are listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution.
Osterberg's theory, according to Osterberg's theory of college radio, if you have 10,000 kids, man, going to a college, and there's one free station, it's not going to be divided between the use of all the kids. There's going to be one snot, the most obnoxious, grasping person in the school is going to figure out a way to get a hold of those toys, And so you generally meet, they're pretty twerpy, but on the other hand, I like the kids who listen to them.
WIDR, Kalamazoo, your exception to Osterberg's theory.
You find they don't understand you? Yeah. You think you're normal?
I've been misunderstood. But long enough now.
But we understand you, Iggy. We understand you. WIDR.
Hello, everyone out there in Radio Land. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. This next article is from Michigan Advance, and it was published and written by Robin Bravender today, July 10th. Headline is, Environmentalists Scoff as Upton Helps Launch GOP Conservation Club. U.S. Representative Fred Upton on Wednesday joined his GOP colleagues on Capitol Hill in announcing the formation of a new conservation caucus. The kickoff of the Roosevelt Conservation Caucus comes after President Trump gave a widely criticized speech this week, touting his administration's environmental record, and as Republican lawmakers appear increasingly eager to herald their green credentials. But environmentalists are accusing Upton and others in the group of attempting to greenwash their records. Upton has a lifetime score of 26% from the League of Conservation Voters, an advocacy group that tracks lawmakers' pro-environmental votes. He is one of the higher scores among House Republicans. His LCV score has fluctuated dramatically in recent years. It was 40% in 2018 and 0% in 2010. By the way, there's a reason for that. In 2010, and especially following this, there was a lot of pressure from dark money donors, particularly the Koch brothers, to basically, they would kind of use the threats of a well-backed primary challenger against kind of these center-right Republicans like Fred Upton, and say, if you do not shift your position on X, Y, and Z, we're going to run this guy and end your career. There's actually a really good passage about this in Dark Money, which basically asks the question, how does a Republican like Fred Upton go from, at least in his language, in his statements, talking about concern over climate change to, after one particular election cycle, then becoming a climate change denier. And then maybe now, as the political winds have shifted, deciding maybe to go back to his previous, more neutral position. Honestly, I think this just shows you the kind of politician that Fred Upton is, i.e., like most of them. His actual ideology and policies shift with the winds of public opinion and public outcry. I really don't think there's much that is very principled about a guy who is only now coming out and saying he cares about the environment, because honestly, let's be clear. The last election was the first time in his entire career that he won by single digits. That he won by such a close margin. So if you're going to try to secure your space or your role in Southwest Michigan as its representative, tactically, you're going to have to try to be less of a butthead about the environment, as we see Upton doing. As the former chair of the U.S. House Energy and Commerce Committee, Upton was one of the central players in the formerly GOP-led House efforts to fight the Obama administration's environmental policies and regulations. Upton joined other Republicans from the U.S. Senate and House on Wednesday to formally announce the launch of the group, which its leaders said will embrace and promote constructive efforts to resolve conservation and environmental problems that align with market-based approaches. Upton will serve as vice chair of the new caucus. In 2018, the Michigan congressman joined a bipartisan House caucus aimed at pursuing climate change policies. He stressed on Wednesday that climate change is real. So now he's changed his mind back again. Well, good for us, I guess. And noted that while the U.S. government is divided, many of us, all of us, I hope, do care deeply about the environment. The Republicans in the caucus stressed they intend to approach the environment differently than their Democratic colleagues, some of whom are pushing for the Green New Deal. This whole idea that we can protect the environment with free market, which, by the way, believing in the invisible hand of the free market is how we got to where we are today. Looking at it this way, you know capitalism is an effective system, because despite only existing for a minute fraction of human history, it's already created an extinction level event in its short time existed. Again, think of it, capitalism, like big C capitalism, has really only existed for the better part of a century and a half, 2 centuries, with some kind of the pre-capitalist structures before that. But what we think of like industrial revolution capitalism, it's very, very new. Excuse me. So it goes on to say John Walke, clean air director of the National Resources Defense Council, said at least reason for concern that a caucus is purposely avoiding controversial issues in the name of focusing on less controversial issues is a way that would make them that would let them say there's a conservative environmental agenda. He said the caucus should definitely be judged by how much and how fast it will act to cut dangerous air pollution. We'll have to see what the answer to that question is. So, again, I think I kind of made my point during that article. Don't believe a flip-flopper on literally the most important existential crisis in human history to do what is necessary or what is right. Do we want to give him a cookie for coming back to the light side? Not really. Like, that's the bare minimum that is necessary. Well, I mean, actually, to be very, very clear about the kinds of policies that these Republicans are proposing would not stop catastrophic climate change, proven unable to do so. And we should certainly not believe solutions from people who just a few short years ago or concurrently were rubber stamping environmental regulations that was putting us on a course towards species death. So now we're gonna switch gears a little bit. This is gonna be kind of a national issue. There's a little bit more minutia in this one, so I'll be have to explain a few things as I go along. But this is about a conference that recently happened in our neighbors out to the west. The DSA, Jacobin, and Haymarket Books got together and basically hosted this socialism conference over in Chicago. And there were some problems with it. This is an article from the Gray Zone. It's written by Ben Norton and Max Blumenthal, who are very, very well-known journalists in independent leftist press. So here was, let's get right to the root of the problem. Very cheekily, they start the article by saying, socialism is now apparently brought to you by the U.S. State Department. I gotta say, everybody, if you're socialists watching this program, y'all, we made it. We made it. What do I mean when I say they made it? Well, tell you what. We've gotten to the point where the establishment is trying to infiltrate and spread their ideas to capital S socialist organizing. Y'all, we made it, man. The opportunists don't come along unless there's opportunity. Oh. So, yeah, for me and all the other socialist organizers, I'd like to thank the Academy, now that the military-industrial complex is trying to infiltrate and co-opt socialism. We couldn't have done it without everybody's help, all y'all out there spreading those socialist memes. Woohoo! Yes, get the streamers out. So, let's stop being so cheeky for quite a second and specify. So what are Ben and Max talking about? They accuse this conference that has some of the most powerful institutions on the American socialist but avowedly anti-communist left, bringing together a motley crew of regime change activists to demonize official enemies of Washington. One anti-China panel on the conference features speakers from two different organizations that are both bankrolled by the U.S. government's soft power arm, the National Endowment for Democracy, a group founded out of Ronald Reagan's CIA in the 1980s to grease the wheels of right-wing regime change efforts and promote free markets across the planet. Another longtime ally who has spoken at every single annual socialism conference since 2009, Anand Gopal, works at a liberal foundation that is directly funded by the U.S. State Department. He is headlining a panel this year to provide a socialist view of the Arab Spring. Yet another 2019 conference panel rails against the socialist governments of Nicaragua and Cuba, two-thirds of John Bolton's troika of tyranny, with outspoken proponents of regime change. One of the speakers, Dan LaBoats, hosted an event in 2018 that featured right-wing Nicaraguan activists wearing masks and disguised as students who were junketed to meet with Republican lawmakers in Washington by the U.S. government-funded right-wing organization Freedom House. The Socialism Conference's regime-changing lobbying Nicaragua expert, LaBots, has admitted in leaked emails obtained by the Gray Zone that there, quote-unquote, there is virtually no left among the opposition to Nicaragua's democratically elected socialist government. LaBots, a leader within the Democratic Socialists of America, likewise acknowledged in these emails that there is, quote-unquote, little likelihood of an outcome to the rebellion that goes beyond a more democratic capitalist regime. But he has still vociferously lobbied for Nicaragua's Sandinista government to be overthrown by U.S. government-backed insurgents, and is using his platform at the biggest socialist conference in the United States to do so. So this next part of the article goes into a lot of kind of wonkish history of leftist politics in the United States. I think that'll be more interesting to some listeners than others. But the long and the short of it, and this is kind of critiques the Trotsky folks for a second there, but they talk about what's changed. The ISO dissolved. That was a group, the International Socialist Organization dissolved. They were pro-socialist but avowedly anti-communist. Not really about that internationalism. And this article basically goes on to describe them as they said the ISO claimed to be anti-war, but its leaders spent a disproportionate percentage of their time and resources attacking the anti-imperialist left. They could more accurately be referred to as the anti-imperialist left. The ISO voted to dissolve over March. And who has stepped up in their place? The Democratic Socialists of America is currently the largest self-described socialist organization in the U.S., more than 60,000 card-carrying members. It is also very heterogeneous, with many internal contradictions and conflicting political views. I like to point this out, especially in the context that we do have a local chapter, the Southwest Michigan Democratic Socialists of America, and for my part, most of the members of that group seem to be range from particularly like revolutionary socialists to people who maybe do in fact believe in the tactic of infiltrating the Democratic Party, but focus more of their energy or most of their energy into critical, needed grassroots organizing. There are some DSA chapters that focus far more on the electoral politics. Some DSA chapters that would probably be better described as kind of New Deal liberals. But, excuse me. But this particular conference, for the first time in 2019, joined together two new sponsors, the DSA, Jacobin Magazine, which again has been criticized for being particularly anti-communist. And sorry, going on here. The schedule of panels on foreign policy and international issues features a veritable who's who of leftist regime change activists. There's even a talk devoted specifically to demonizing the anti-imperialist left. Excuse me. Curiously, the 2019 Socialism Conference has no panels devoted specifically to Venezuela, which since this January has endured a U.S.-led right-wing coup attempt and which is suffering under suffocating sanctions that amount to a de facto economic blockade. In the past, the ISO has harshly criticized Venezuela's democratically elected socialist government, condemning Presidents Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro for not being radical enough and for not supposedly implementing the vague concept of socialism from below, which, by the way, if you've actually done a lot of research into Venezuela, there is the way they engage in democracy is actually, I would definitely say, far more participatory than in the United States. Community decisions are often made in citizens' assemblies, and these politics and such are discussed by a wide swath of the working class and poor population, far more than you'd see in the United States. It goes on to talk a little bit more about one of the most eyebrow-raising panels at the 2019 Socialism Conference is entitled China and the U.S. Inter-Imperial Rivalry or Class Struggle and Solidarity. The panel portrays the U.S. and China as equally malicious imperialist powers, downplaying and whitewashing the uniquely destructive nature of Washington's foreign wars and corporate domination. Because again, I'm not uncritical of China, but say what you will about China, but they are not going around bombing the hell out of whatever countries they feel like doing. As a matter of fact, they do not participate in interventionist warfare at anywhere near scale of the United States. It's kind of our calling card. The panel features 3 speakers, 2 of whom work for anti-China groups that are funded by the U.S. government's regime change arm, the National Endowment for Democracy. The 3rd speaker is Ashley Smith, a former leader of the ISO who spent the past 8 years romanticizing foreign-backed far-right sectarian Islamist moderate rebels in Syria, which, for those of you who've been paying attention, the whole thing about moderate rebels was a huge crock of poop. The first speaker on the panel is Elaine Liu, the program officer at China Labor Watch. The group is described by the Socialism Conference website simply as a New York-based NGO advocating for workers' rights in China. What Socialism Conference sponsors DSA, Jacobin, and Haymarket did not disclose is that the speaker's employer is funded by the National Endowment for Democracy. Oh, no. Those who don't know about the NED, the NAD states without qualification that its goals include supporting free markets abroad. At the top of the page on its website is a video of right-wing Cold Warrior Ronald Reagan inaugurating the U.S. government-funded body. National Endowment for Democracy, that's something that pops up to me. As somebody who studied a lot about kind of the Powell memo, the strategy of Lewis Powell, and his infiltration of the nonprofit sector and high education. Yeah, the National Endowment for Democracy was kind of an intellectual vanguard for these kind of free market interventionist policies, making the whole world capitalist and letting the invisible hand of the free market give you a reach around or whatever. Anyway, so a direct connection with a lot of nefarious groups. And, this is a very rich article in information and data and these kind of connections. I want to try to see if I can find another really pertinent... Oh, yeah. So this one really struck me. Yet another speaker at the 2019 Socialism Conference works for a liberal foundation directly funded by the U.S. government. Journalist Anand Gopal, who had been a close ally for the ISO for a decade, has a panel all to himself, a socialist view of the Arab Spring. The Socialism Conference did not provide a bio for him, yet alone disclosed that his employer is funded by the U.S. government. It simply described him as a Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist, and said he'll explain how to understand the lessons of the protests, uprising, rebellions, and wars that shook the Arab world beginning in 2011. Left unmentioned is the Gopal serves as the fellow with the International Security Program at the New America Foundation. The foundation's website makes it very clear that it is directly funded by the U.S. State Department, along with massive corporations and banks. Clearly institutions that are invested in advancing the revolutionary socialist cause. He has harshly attacked the anti-imperialist left for opposing the international proxy war on Syria. He strongly supported the Syrian opposition, which is dominated by Salafi jihadists, but which Gopal has consistently whitewashed and portrayed as a supposedly progressive force. Gopal likewise reported inside al-Qaeda-occupied territory, which the New Yorker euphemistically described as Syria's last bastion of freedom. And he has constantly downplayed the billions of dollars of funding and weapons from the U.S., Europe, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar that kept the Syrian opposition afloat, fueling the brutal war for years. Another noteworthy 2019 Socialism Conference panel called Problems of the U.S. Left, the Cases of Cuba and Nicaragua is led by Dan Labotes and Samuel Farber. Outspoken proponents of regime change in the two respective countries. The speaker's problem with the U.S. left appears to be that it has demonstrated too much solidarity with socialist governments in Havana and Managua, which, in their view, from inside the United States, rely more on bureaucracy than democracy. Farber is a Cuban exile who left the country for unspecified reasons in '58, the year before the revolution, and spent the rest of his life as a professional critic of its socialist government. Today, he contributes regular articles in the Cuban Revolution to journals from Jacobin to New Politics to In These Times, where he published a trenchant denunciation of Fidel Castro upon his death in 2016. Farber accuses Castro of developing a model of state capitalism. By the way, Okay, that's really getting into the weeds there. So I think I'm just going to go on, and we'll talk about state capitalism on a future episode and what that means. And this is Dan Labots. He's an opponent of Nicaragua and the Sandinista movement that it represents. Labots has published an anti-Sandinista manifesto with Haymarket Books, which is advertised as a survey of the failures of the Nicaraguan Revolution by one of the most important Marxist historians of Latin America. In June 2018, a U.S.-backed violent regime change attempt surged across Nicaragua, threatening the rule of democratically elected President Daniel Ortega. Labots attempted to mobilize left-wing U.S. support for the anti-Sandinista opposition. That month, he joined an anti-Sandinista event co-sponsored by DSA's New York branch. Haymarket, the academic journal NACLA, and the Marxist Education Project. The event featured speeches by several Nicaraguan anti-Sandinista activists who were involved in the regime change attempt, including self-described students who wore masks on stage, concealing their identities from the audience. Excuse me. The Gray Zone has obtained internal DSA email reports authored by Labots that revealed that days after the event at St. Peter's Church, those same students met with right-wing Republican legislators on Capitol Hill, including neoconservative Senators Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, and Ileana Rus-Latinen. The students beamed with pride, appearing without masks and photo ops with the avowedly anti-socialist members of Congress. Their trip was financed by Freedom House, a right-wing soft power organization that is funded almost entirely by the U.S. governments. The students' U.S.-backed delegation included Victor Quadras, a fanatical right-wing activist who openly supported Donald Trump's agenda for Latin America and blamed the governments of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua for the caravan of desperate asylum seekers on the U.S.-Mexico border. Again, just to kind of sum up, so that's a phenomenon we see, like a lot of these right-wing supporters of regime change being featured and given a platform at ostensibly socialist events, when in fact their actual politics are extremely reactionary and their motivations for wanting a coup come from a right-wing ideological worldview. Again, how socialist is that? So, again, this is actually a very long and thorough article. I want y'all to, if y'all want to check it out, it's over at the Gray Zone. Title of the article, DSA/Jacobin/Haymarket sponsored Socialism Conference features U.S. government-funded regime change activists. And one of the reasons I want to talk about this and why I think it's important, socialism has been undergoing an incredible transformation in the United States of America. Something that had been a dirty word as shortly as 4 or 5 years ago is suddenly gaining mainstream popularity. I mean, heck, you can find articles about Marx and Marxism in Teen Vogue. Props to Teen Vogue for that. But we must be careful, because as socialism is becoming more popular, people who had formerly not wanted anything to do with it now want to come in and co-opt it and tell you what it means to be a socialist. I'll tell you what it doesn't mean to be a socialist. It doesn't mean that you support U.S. intervention or regime change in any capacity. It does not turn out well, as we have seen time and time and time and time again. And as the old saying goes, socialism works well on paper, but in practice, it gets overthrown by a CIA-backed coup. This, to me, it's also an extension of a troubling kind of issue I've seen from 2016 onward, whereas wherein a lot of these leftist conferences, these progressive conferences, I'm thinking particularly of the People's Summit, to, again, a slightly different beast, but similar problems. A lot of people there who are okay with regime change, and absolutely no discussions about imperialism or even endless wars, which is kind of the political paradigm friendly way of talking about imperialism. There are literally zero panels at that one about intervention. And at this conference, it sounds like most of the discussion around interventionism and regime change are actually positive ones. There's a lot of folks, I go to DSA meetings with my folks here in Southwest Michigan, not officially a member. I read Jacobin, used to have a subscription, and I buy a lot of Haymarket books. But keep in mind, we all have to read between the lines and make sure that as socialism is becoming more popular, we do not throw the international under the bus. And I don't even mean like the Coordinated Socialist International. I mean the people, the working peoples of this planet. We cannot throw them under the bus. We have to make sure that any socialism, any real socialism, has an internationalism that decries and condemns war in all its forms, and certainly is not trying to carry water for the U.S. power establishment. We're going to go ahead and take a little break. Come back. We might be wrapping up the show just a little bit early today. Until then, go ahead, please enjoy the music of Quantum Fleek. When we come back, we're going to play a quick ad, and then perhaps close the show out. We'll see. Y'all listening to the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR, your only source for political revolution.
Voting is important. From deciding Kalamazoo's best drunk food to picking the fan favorite for Wider's Battle of the Bands, voting allows people to voice their opinions and change their world. To vote for offices such as mayors, senators, and the president takes a little more than a link to a Google Forms survey. Before you vote, you have to register. This can be done in person, by mail, and, in many states, online. For more information, you can point your favorite web browser to vote.gov.
Hello, everyone. This is the Hoodrat Strategist radio program, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo. We just want to let you know about some of the events coming up this week. Go check those out. All you social justice folks out there. On Friday, July 12th, the Kalamazoo 1st Congressional UCC is hosting Lights for Liberty. It's an event to raise voices and hearts in unison to demand an end to the concentration camps, the human detention camps. It'll take place from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And again, that will be at the UCC Church. Also, going on later this week. Oh, and I did forget to mention there is some new news about some of the rumblings in the Kalamazoo race coming up. David Benak has officially thrown his hat in the ring for mayor, and then Patrice Griffin, who is going to be running to keep her seat in November. The seat she got appointed to after Shannon's resignation. She will be kicking off her campaign at 6 p.m. on Thursday. And then also coming up Saturday is the Black Arts Festival over at LaCrone Park. That'll be from 12 o'clock noon to 8 p.m. And I don't know, that's not necessarily political, but I think it's a very important cultural event for the city of Kalamazoo. So I'll check it out. On Sunday, July 14th, out front, Kalamazoo is hosting a community organizing class from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. On Monday, July 15th, Book Bug, and this is a bookstore, will be featuring an event, Action for Families at the Border. And they'll be having a special guest, border advocate Jill Zwires is going to be there to talk. And then also later that day, over at the City Commission, later that day over at the City Commission, there will be a vote on the resolution for our undocumented neighbors to have driver's licenses. And then at the Kalamazoo Nonprofit Advocacy Coalition at 6:30 p.m., community-driven storytelling. And that's also an really important cultural event that's going to be raising money for JAVS, that's Justice Against Bullying in Schools. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close out the show. I want to thank y'all for listening. This has been the Hoodrat Strategist radio program. Until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.